Lisa from Been There Got Out, and guess what? We figured it out, just like we have to do all the time in family court and life and parenting, where something doesn't work and you come up with something else. So today's guest is very luckily lives near me, and since we couldn't get the technology to work, she decided to come over. We're just going to do it live from here. So if you hear loud panting in the background, that's my dog. He's really old. Hopefully he'll be quiet. But thank you so much, Donna.
It's so great to be here. As you said, we have to keep moving on, not let anything get in our stride, and just make it happen.
Yeah. Okay. So first, we're going to talk about the secret shield or protection that's available in every court that you might not know about and how to ask for help. So Donna, first tell us who you are and a little bit about your background.
Hi everyone, my name is Donna Drumm. I'm an attorney licensed to practice in New York. I'm also a certified Americans with Disabilities advocate, and I am the program director at Mercy College for the Legal Studies program. So I teach non-lawyers how to work with lawyers.
And then how did you get involved with this? And you know, my favorite question, what makes you so good at your job? Because you had a very interesting backstory.
Well, what makes me so good at my job is that I speak to people that aren't involved in the legal system every single day, and I break it down in normal language so that people can understand it. And my background in this was I was a practicing attorney in New York with a very large, famous law firm. And then I went to work in a consulting gig in Arizona, and I met this wonderful realtor who's the first person you meet when you move, right? It's a realtor. And we went to the movies together, and she handed me a yellow envelope, and she was being sued for $1.25 million. And she won the case, and she's writing a book on it now, of which I'm helping her on. And through the 7 years that it took to get through this case, it had to do with her husband after she was divorced. She had PTSD. And I saw how somebody who has a disability, an invisible disability, how the legal system can erode that normally highly functional, wonderful person. And she found out about Dr. Karen Huffer, Huffer, that links the Americans with Disabilities Act to accommodations in the courtroom. And then I became certified, and I devoted my whole practice to that.
Yeah, and I remember you had said something about erring on the side
of gentleness, on the kindness, because you all know, if you've been involved in the legal system, whether it's a divorce or contracts or probate, that it can be very, very affecting. And what accommodations do, the secret sauce and the secret weapon, is that it makes the court system experience, whether you're at home, whether you can't sleep, whether you're anticipating what's going to be happening the next day in court or the next 2 weeks in court, it makes it a gentler experience.
Yeah, and so you said that also your background as an educator, because you're dealing with lay people all the time, helps you explain things, which makes us have less stress.
Yes, one of the things that you want to ask your attorney or whomever it is that is helping you is, what is the next step? What are the next 3 steps? And that is going to reduce your anxiety, and ask them in a way that you understand. So keep persisting, and it's better to do this talking to them rather than texting or emailing, and say, okay, well, I'm going to put these papers in. Then what can I expect? Then what can I expect? So the steps, not necessarily what outcome you can expect, but the steps. So I use it as an example of going into a hospital. You go into a hospital, you're in emergency mode, and you don't know who's going to be talking to you in the emergency room. And I learned to stop people and say, okay, what's the next thing that's going to happen in the hospital? Who's the next person I'm going to be speaking to? So when you're in an unknown environment, don't be afraid to ask those questions. What are the next 3 steps? And that will reduce your anxiety and give you knowledge. And we all know that knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think about how we freak out all the time. Like, I need to get this long in the distance goal. And the way you're describing, it's like, no, what can I do right now? What's coming up right now just to get through the next little bit of time?
Yes.
Because we know these things can go on for years.
Yes, it tends to be overwhelming if you project too far into the future.
Mm-hmm.
And keep it simple and a day at a time.
Yeah. All right. So one of the things we talked about is the pre-trial process. When somebody knows, okay, I have to go to court, but it hasn't happened yet. Like, what should people be aware of in terms of what's available to them in the family court system, and what steps should they take?
Well, that's the secret, right? So the secret is gaining accommodations in every single courtroom in the United States and every single state courthouse, which is family. And if you have a disability, if you have anxiety, if you have PTSD, and we'll go through the definition of disabilities, which many people are very surprised about, the wide definition of disabilities. You can go into the courthouse, you can ask for the Americans with Disabilities Act liaison or ADAAA liaison, who is usually in the clerk's office, and you can make a list of the requests of what will help you to have equal access in the court. If you're nervous, if you have high anxiety and you are in fight, freeze, or flight, you can't be concentrating on what's going on in the courtroom. If you are a victim of individual domestic violence and you're waiting in the courtroom in the same hallway as the person who perpetrated the violence against you, you can't be thinking about what's going to be happening in the courtroom. How am I going to be the best that I can be? So these accommodations are to help to relieve some of the stress, to give you equal access to the courts, and that is mandated by the Americans with Disabilities Act.
I see someone noted that they're in Canada, and do you know if there's anything in Canada like this?
I don't, but we can certainly find out.
Yeah. Okay, good. So there was also a question about, but I think you've answered it, on who do you ask if you're self-representing. So anybody can just go in and talk to a clerk or find out Americans with Disabilities.
That's right. And one of the great things about the Americans with Disabilities Act, when somebody is asking for accommodations, is that if you can't do it, say you just suffered from an accident or you're in the hospital, if you can't do it, someone can do it for you on your behalf. So as an example, when I am an Americans with Disabilities Act advocate, I will write the accommodations on behalf of my client. So you can, your lawyer can, an advocate can, so it's not just having to have a lawyer at all.
So what kinds of accommodations, for example, like let's say I have PTSD and I know I'm terrified of going into court and I'm so disorganized and I'm emotional, like what kinds of accommodations, if I have a diagnosis, could I ask for?
Right. So let's say that you have difficulty in putting together your financials for your divorce. And your lawyer says, okay, you need a month to put together your financials, and you just can't do it. You know that you're a functioning person, but your PTSD or your anxiety is getting in your way, or your depression is getting in your way, and every time you go to do it, you can't. So an extension for filing papers would be an example. Inside the courthouse, when you're in the courtroom itself, you can ask for an accommodation for the other lawyer to speak in a dignified manner if you believe that you're being accosted by the opposing party's lawyer, which many of my clients do.
Here all the time. We always talk about bully opposing counsel.
Yes, yes. And every single time that I've asked for an accommodation, the judge would say, well, of course I'm going to have dignity in the courtroom. Of course I'm going to make sure that people don't interrupt each other. So that takes away some of the anxiety of a bully. And I don't want to call lawyers bullies because I'm a lawyer and I have great respect for lawyers and judges. But that's how the environment can be maintained in a more calm manner. You can ask for breaks if you know that you're the kind of person that loses their train of thought after 30 or 45 minutes. If you are on the stand, you can ask for someone to help you read a document. I've done that on the stand in court. You can ask for, if you have physical disabilities, of course, think of this as a ramp in a courthouse. Nobody asked anybody's permission to use that ramp. If they're a wheelchair user, to use that ramp. It's nobody's business as to why you're using that ramp. You need it to get equal access into the courthouse and then into the courtroom. So think of those things that are going to help you, because it is a case-by-case basis, to be on an equal access with somebody who doesn't have that disability.
What's so interesting is when we were talking about how, well, I know you don't like to say bully, but often one of the strategies used against our clients is opposing counsel gets them very uncomfortable. And I just interviewed another attorney in Manhattan, and I've talked to lots of attorneys about the level of civility and how it's gone down. And often that's why lawyers get out of litigating, because they say, I can't believe that it's sunk this low. So I'm struck by the fact that by asking a lawyer for an accommodation, that would actually affect the civility in the courtroom. That almost makes sure that people are respectful and civil, which they should be anyway, but often they're not.
Right. So again, you're asking the ADA liaison, and then you're going to be writing out the accommodations that you need and submitting that to the ADA liaison. The ADA liaison is going to look at 2 or 3 things. A, does this person have a disability? Okay, check. B, is this something that the courthouse can provide, or something that the judge can provide? Can the judge allow extensions? In most cases, yes. Can the judge say, this must be a civil and we're going to keep a calm environment? Yes. Can a judge say, I'm going to make sure that nobody hurts you or, emotionally hurts you? No. Certainly with the court officer, no one's going to physically hurt you. So you've got to manage the expectations on what can be done in the courtroom. They will not pay for things for you. They will not pay for a note taker. So if you want a note taker, for example, you would bring your own note taker. A lot of people like to have copies of the tapes, of the audio tapes, so that they can process it after, because when you're in the moment and you have executive function disabilities, it's very difficult to be processing at the same time that you're trying to figure out what your answers are, or trying to, tell your lawyer, don't forget this, don't forget this. So tapes, or many times you have to pay for the tapes. And so those are that's the process. So sometimes it goes to the judge, and I don't believe that it should go to the judge because this is private information. So that's why it's good to have an advocate, so that we know the language to use to oppose why it would go to the judge. But eventually, whatever accommodations are accepted. So let's say you asked for an accommodation for a calm and civil environment, okay, and it was accepted. So that goes to the judge. So the judge is now instructed that they must make this announcement, okay? Let's say that there's breaks. That information would go to the judge because the judge controls the timing of the breaks. So in video calls, for example, the same thing. When I say courtroom, I also mean for virtual appearances, because it may not matter where you are, the anxiety is still going to come up. The interference with your ability to function and process the communication and process the emotions are still going to come up, because your brain doesn't know the difference. If you're in front of a camera or if you're in the courtroom, your brain doesn't know the difference. You're still going to have those reactions.
Yeah. I also noted how you said the court won't pay for things. So as an educator, I remember in high school, when I taught high school, there's something called an IEP, an individualized education plan, or a 504, but the school is responsible to pay for services. This is different. So the court is not responsible to financially cover whatever accommodations might be allowed. So I'm glad that you noted that. People don't come in and be like, here's my bill.
And many parents in the system have children who have disabilities, and they may have disabilities. So the expectations, again, and I'm glad you brought that up, Lisa, are that whereas it's a different set of laws in the schools to provide a free education to children. So once a person becomes an adult, their disabilities are guaranteed under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a federal act.
Okay. Sorry, I just saw another question.
Okay.
Can you, and I'll just throw it in now.
Great.
Can you ask for an accommodation as having a hearing virtually? Is that considered?
I think that's a wonderful, provided that it would help your disability. I think that was a good outcome of COVID, because before I would ask for virtual hearings, and the court would say, or the clerk would say, no, we can't do it, because they would have to drag the technology from the third floor to the second floor. But now we know that many courts have the technology to do it, so it's much easier to get a virtual hearing, provided that it connects with your disability. So you always want to be linking the accommodation that you're asking for with your disability.
And so you also mentioned that, physical disabilities are obvious, and we talked about PTSD, but are any other hidden types of disabilities that you can think of very common?
Yeah, so let's go through the definition of a disability. So under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the definition of a disability is what impacts a major life activity. And what are major life activities? Reading, writing, walking, thinking, eating. So if you have a stomach disorder, not only that, but let's say that you're unfortunate enough to have cancer, and your cancer is in remission. You could still ask for an accommodation, because we don't know when that's going to reoccur. So you may have had breast cancer 5 years ago, but it leaves you very fatigued. And you might be in remission, but it still leaves you fatigued. So that could be a connection between, you're recovering from an illness.
I'm thinking we have a client who, I think she had just had a baby. It was like a week after the baby, or it was a week before the baby, whatever it was. And they were saying that she had to come to this hearing. And I thought, that's outrageous. Is that someone who probably should have asked for an accommodation? I don't know through disabilities, but being pregnant, like that pregnant.
Pregnancy was recently added as a disability.
Really?
Recently added as a disability. Because the Americans with Disabilities Act takes care of, and the entities that are mandated to provide accommodations are public services. So the court is a public service, public accommodations when you go to a hotel, in the employment as well. So there were women that were pregnant that were at grocery stores and not given chairs to sit on because nobody else had a chair. Mm-hmm. So pregnancy is absolutely a disability.
Wow. Okay. Glad to ask that question.
As those of us who have been pregnant know.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay. So something that came up was something I wanted to ask you anyway. Can the other side use it against you? Like, I know you said judges aren't supposed to know, but can it be seen as a bias? That's something our clients are really worried about, since I've mentioned this to them. Like, right. I don't want, my lawyer said that we shouldn't put in my PTSD because then it's going to affect the outcome of the case.
Great. So we all know that in divorce there's 4 or 5 issues. And when it comes to discussing with clients revealing a disability, that would go towards the issue of child custody, because we don't want anything to appear as though we are unfit parents. PTSD, you can have PTSD and still be a great parent. You can have anxiety and still be a great parent. You're going to therapy, you're taking your meds. You can be blind and still be a great parent. So we've got to advocate that people who have disabilities have different abilities, and it doesn't preclude us from being parents, and good parents, and caring parents. So the concern that you brought up with when a lawyer says, no, I don't want to bring up PTSD, again, you can just use what I said. How does PTSD affect being a parent? Number 1. Number 2, as far as that's a strategy that you really do need to discuss with your attorney, because chances are that they're asking for psychological records if the issue has come up that the parent is unfit, that they're asking for psychological records. If it's a physical reason, they're asking for medical records. So it may have already been divulged So if it's already divulged, then there's no risk. If it hasn't been divulged, then here's some things to think about. The request itself, with only a medical diagnosis to say that you have a disability, so the doctor that's treating you, a medically licensed professional, will write, I've been treating this person for this long and I've diagnosed them with this. That's it. And that gets connected to your accommodation request. And it is, as I said, private, and that is not supposed to be shared with the judge. And it is definitely not shared with the opposing party. So the judge could get up, okay, and say, thank you for coming. We're now going to begin. I just want to review that we're going to be having a break every hour. We're going to be, conducting ourselves in a honorable manner. There will be no crosstalk, and the judge doesn't have to say why. And the judge, it's private. This is private information. So I'm going to use a legal term now. Some people ask me, does it go to the opposing counsel? So opposing counsel, they can have the knowledge because somebody, just called them on the phone and said, hey, this person has a disability. But the real thing that clients are worried about is it going to be motion practice? So when I ask for a disability, does that request have to be sent to the other side, and then the other side argues and says, this person shouldn't have a disability? That does not happen at all. But to get back to the root of your question, revealing the disability, if you believe that the disability does not affect and will not affect you adversely as far as an unfit parent, and if that's an issue, then you have to really think about the strategy.
Okay, someone also asked, we talked about the level of civility, what about barring the other side from asking abusive questions?
Well, my question would be, when you're right, if somebody asked that, I would say to them, how would the judge know it was abusive? Can we make that a more specific request so that the judge, we know, and we're communicating to the ADA coordinator what abusive is? So what would be abusive? That's what I would say. What would be abusive? And then I would craft it in such a way that the judge would be able to observe and then say, okay, excuse me, but tone it down or whatever. So
yeah, one thing that just came up that happens all the time is false allegations against our clients of them being mentally ill, like if they've been on any kind of medication. How does that play into this?
It wouldn't. That's a different legal argument. So you're asking for an accommodation because you have a disability. If you don't have a disability, you wouldn't be asking for an accommodation. However, there is a third part of the Americans with Disabilities Act, discrimination against somebody who has been, who's regarded as having a disability. And that's an excellent strategy, which I'm just thinking about now. So if I see somebody and I treat them differently because they have, let's say they have multiple sclerosis, and because that's obvious, you can see their posture's different, you can see that they walk, that they might fall a little, more easier, and I don't hire them because of their MS. That's discrimination. It's also discrimination if they have MS, and if they don't have MS, and they appear to have a disability, and I discriminate against them. Mm-hmm. So I could see how if they're continually discriminating against, or the lawyer's discriminating against, and you have to really prove that, how you could use an ADA claim because you have the appearance of a disability. Mm-hmm. But I've not seen it, but it's a very interesting question.
Yeah, I'm thinking about a client who is in recovery for alcoholism for years and years, but sometimes still seems a little foggy, and it's mm-hmm. being weaponized against them. Mm-hmm.
Well, you've got evidence, evidence for that. You've got drug tests for that.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that happens, because people in recovery are heroes.
Yeah. So one thing too, we touched on a little bit, is sometimes lawyers are afraid to ask. Mm-hmm. What do you do if your lawyer is like, well, I hear you and I agree with you, but I don't think we should do that, and you really want you really, after listening now, like, no, I think it's going to have an effect, because you had said in the past that this kind of thing doesn't just affect you personally, it can affect your presentation in court, it can affect your parenting to not have accommodations.
Yes. So if you're a lawyer, if you, after listening to our discussion, hopefully go to your lawyer and you say, look, I really want to have accommodations, I believe I should have accommodations, they may be reluctant because they don't understand it. So have them call me, okay? Because I educate lawyers a lot on the ADA. Do not expect that your lawyer will know about this. That's why it's a secret. And that's why I do this. So have them call me, Donna Drumm, and you can look me up at Drumm Advocacy, DRUMM advocacy.com, and my contact information is there. Then if you don't call me and you're advocating for yourself with your attorney and they say, no, I don't think it's a good idea, and you're not convinced, then get the form. Here, fill out the form, bring it to your attorney and say, I'm going to send this. And let them have an opportunity to take a look at it first, to give them an opportunity as to why they don't believe that it would be in your best interest, and then make your decision.
Okay. What if somebody doesn't realize they have a disability? We had an interesting discussion comparing notes on how clients present who do have PTSD, because most people who have it, who are just entering the process, they don't know that that's what it is. It's just so what do you see in terms of how they communicate with you as an attorney? I mean, I'll hold my comments, but it's probably, I know it's a lot of the same stuff.
Your family members know. Your friends know. They know that there's been a shift with you because of some PTSD is a traumatic event. Okay, and what happens to the body and the mind after a traumatic event. And I was just with a client, I do house calls, just like I'm doing a house call today, and he had his wife there, and I could tell that he couldn't make a decision, and he kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And I would say 15 minutes would go by and the same questions.
Like cycling.
Yeah, cycling. And after a while, I said, I'm not a clinician, but I think that you have PTSD. And his wife said, honey, this is what I've been telling you. So the people around you that you trust, if they're saying that they've noticed a difference in your behavior, then go to a doctor and find out. My mom, while I was going through my divorce, I was crying all the time. Why are you crying all the time? Why are you crying all the time? Well, because my life is devastated. I'm losing my life here. And I went to a therapist and I went on antidepressants. So listen to the people around you. If you know you're not the same, If your communication skills of people if you're sending out many emails, if the night before a hearing, if again, you can't concentrate on something you used to be able to concentrate on because you just, you know you're an effective person, but you just can't bring yourself to do it. That could be depression. Not opening up your mail is one of the first indicators of depression. So be aware of yourself. There's nothing wrong with it, nothing wrong at all. And the Americans with Disabilities Act is looking to make an equal access and an equal playing field. You can also look up on the internet. JANS is an excellent resource, not only for the types of disabilities, invisible disabilities that people have, but accommodations. If it's not just in the courtroom that you may be finding that you're performing less. You may be performing less at work. Yeah. So you can get accommodations, you can see for accommodation ideas for work as well.
Yeah, something you had said when we last met was that PTSD does not affect one's intellectual abilities, but their executive function. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little more about that? Because I was surprised. I thought it does affect how you can't think straight, but maybe that is executive functioning.
Right. So I think if you were to look at your IQ before PTSD and your IQ after PTSD, it's going to be the same, unless some scientist comes back with a paper that says I'm incorrect. but you know you're not functioning, your executive functioning, your ability to, you could probably still play Jeopardy and do great in Jeopardy. The same, before your traumatic experience to after your traumatic experience. So you're going to have your intellect and your intelligence are the same. You can parent, but it's the triggers and what happens after you're triggered. And that's a chemical reaction in your brain. And the chemical reaction is closing down those receptors in your brain that are giving you the ability to be as functional as you used to be. Does that mean that you can't get your kids up early in the morning to go to school? No, but if you're depressed and you're in bed for 2 weeks and you're not being treated, then there's a road for that type of recovery.
Yeah, so somebody had asked, I just looked quickly, are you ever healed from these kinds of invisible abuse? And I would say, at least for me, I've seen it. I think I've experienced it, but I've seen it with our clients. That's our hashtag is from puddle to ninja. They're like a mess, and we say that person's voice is still in your head so much, we got to get it out. And we're not therapists, but
Right.
I think part of what Donna and I are doing today by educating you and finding out options, when people have an understanding of what's going on and what they can do about it to make things better, that's very empowering. And that, to me, is like on a pathway towards healing. People are like, I get it, I can do something about it, I'm not helpless.
And that's what we're looking for, victim to victor. And it really is that voice that you talked about is that voice that says, I used to be able to do it and I can't understand why I can't do it. I've got too much to do, I can't. And there's many different types of therapies that can help that.
Yeah, and then we'll get into that later with therapists. So, so again, did we forget anything? And then how can people find you?
I want to talk a little bit about something I saw on your feed a few days ago,
Okay.
where somebody was saying my attorney is ghosting me.
Okay.
And I want to talk a little bit from the attorney's point of view and how the client relationship with somebody who has an anxiety, disability, or PTSD. When you're in that mode of sending out those emails, when you're in that high anxiety mode and almost like an OCD, where everything has to, you feel out of control in one area, which is your divorce. So you're trying to make control in another area and place control in another area. So how that can be reflected in your relationship with your attorney is that they won't understand when you are repeating something a lot, when you are following up with them very, very frequently, when you're sending those 23 emails. So try and work with someone like Lisa and her team to make sure that the communication that you have with your attorney is clear and effective, because attorneys who don't understand trauma, who don't understand anxiety and how that affects a client, will tend to see you as a troublesome client. And you need more help and not less help. So the best way you can help yourself is to find a filter. Express what you need to express to your attorney, but it doesn't have to be in 23 emails the day before or 19 emails the day before. And have a heart-to-heart with your attorney about what your communication expectations are. If they went away on vacation for 3 weeks and you want them to be responding back to you and you've sent them 17 documents, chances are that they're not going to be able to respond to you within 3 or 4 days. So have a heart-to-heart, because the relationship between you and your attorney, we don't want that to create more stress for you. Ask your attorney, as far as your communication practices are concerned, I thank you for telling me that there's a hearing in 5 weeks. What could I be doing now? What would you be doing? And let's set up a date before the hearing. So try and manage, and you do this so well in your book, in the last chapters of your book.
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, no, love the book. Look at attorney-client relationships in Lisa's book. Excellent for more tips.
Okay, thanks.
And how you can get in touch with me
yes.
is my website is Drumm Advocacy. That's Drumm like the instrument, DRUMM, advocacy.com. And my I'm on LinkedIn, Donna Drumm, and you'll find my contact information there. And I'd be, call my office, leave me a message, send me an email. My email is ddrumm, DDRUMM, at drummadvocacy.com.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Donna. I'm so glad we made this work out.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right. So take care, everyone, and I'll post the recording of this in just a few minutes. Bye.
Thank you.